All right, guys, let's quickly put together a video on how you can make a flow that is modularized, or basically a subflow that you can call from an existing flow and get some sort of response. So the first thing we'll do is just give this a name. I like to have kind of a unique naming convention for modules, and we'll just call this demo flow. We don't really need a title or description, but I'll go ahead and put in expected input. So this is going to take in a webhook, and the webhook needs to contain some information because we're going to do something based on the information sent. So in this case, expected input, username, status, and then there should obviously be something in here. After we do this, we'll go ahead and enable this flow for API access. This allows it to be called by an external flow. And for this, I'm just going to set up basic authentication. So we'll do demo user and give it some sort of credential. Now, a flow that is calling this flow will need to be using basic authentication in order to hit this endpoint right here, which is the flow URL. So now that we have that, we can add some information or data to the flow or some actual conditions. And the first thing we want to do is check to see if the flow body contains any data. Check body, right? So the first value here is going to be the webhook. Now we can go ahead and specify an example of what the body should look like. And in this case, what I'm going to check is, does this username have any data? So is it equal to or not equal to anything, right? So if it's is not equal to empty, we're going to go to the left path, which would be this stop sign. If we are empty, we're going to go to the right path. And that's going to allow us to send a custom response based on what we've done after the fact. Now I can go ahead and do an initial save right here. And now we'll go ahead and put in some logic so that I can send some sort of response. So all I'm going to do is just concat the fields of the body and send that back. This is super simple, and you could probably just do this in your other flow, but I'm trying to do this as a quick, easy example of what you might be able to do, right? So we're just going to concat body, and then I'll do a space dash, and then I'll add another parameter, and then I'll do status. So basically it's going to create a string that has username, space dash, space, status, right? Now the last step is sending back a response. So in this scenario, because we've set this up as a published flow, we can enable a custom response. We can add parameters. So in this case, we can send either a header or body. I'm really just going to send the body, and in my body, I want it to have some generic information. One thing to note here is you're typically going to want your bodies to be sent back and you want them to be the same. What I mean by that is you want them to have the same fields. So this stop sign here on the left and this stop sign on the right should contain the same fields. Now, in this case, it is a success, and I'm just typing this up in Visual Studio just because it's a little easier for me, and then I'll copy it over. But basically what my body is going to look like is this. And if I transform that, just so you guys can see, it's just a normal JSON with 3 key value pairs or key paths. The first one is status. In this case, it is a success. It's gone down the right or the left side. The next is error message. It will be empty. And then the next is going to be this transformed value, right? That's perfect for this side. Now, what about this side? Basically, we want to do the same thing, but we're going to send back a error in this case. So I'll just come over here, I'll paste the same thing in, and I'll change this. So instead of that, I'll change this to failed. Error message will be something like no data sent in body, right? And that just gives an error back to so that the user that's calling this knows what's going on, and they can then do something on that. Now I will save this, and then the last piece of this flow, or making this flow modular, is basically going over to settings, publishing the flow. We'll publish it to public, and I'm just going to give it a 1.0 release notes for demo, title, mod, demo flow, underscore demo. So we'll go ahead and put this out here. We'll publish this. After we do that, we can also publish it as a connector. The cool part about publishing it as a connector is it will actually show up in our connectors field. Once you've done the flow, once you've published the flow, you can then publish it as a connector and you can select a version. So you could create multiple versions and have them published. Now that I've done that, if I come over to connectors, and I will need to refresh because we've updated the connectors that are available. I can refresh and I'll see mod underscore demo flow. You can see I have a practice one that I created here a moment ago. And we'll go ahead and expand. This is going to fall under kind of your tenant name here. But now you see instead of just demo flow 1, I also have demo flow, and it contains 2 operations, a get, which calls this flow, as well as a post that calls this flow. So now let's try to actually use it. We'll go ahead here and do a new flow. And in this scenario, I'll drag over the post, and you can see that it already has the appropriate host name, the appropriate base path. It does ask for some sort of authorization. So what do? In this case, we'll just add a new authorization. The auth type is already set to basic. So we'll do demo flow here. The user ID is going to be whatever I used a moment ago. And the password is, again, going to be the password that I used. So we'll go to save and use. And now we'll put it in there, right? So now this guy has a little green key. It has the authorization. We can now go over to map, and we can see that the things that I asked for are in here, right? And actually the webhook body looks a little bit incorrect. So I will change this a little bit. And what I'll do is just edit here. And instead of this, so it is type string, that is correct. But what we want to do is just do this because we don't need all of this. And username is type string as well. Object, we don't need that. And we don't need this properties field. So this is kind of the body that's expected, right? It's just username and status. So now that I have that, I can edit what we're sending. So for status, I'll do something like enabled. And for username, I will do, Joe.Strickland. And then I'll save that. I did not do that. So enabled Joe.Strickland. Let's just make sure, and for some reason it did not save appropriately. So we just want to make sure that we're formatting this body in a correct manner. And that might take a little bit of troubleshooting or playing around with it, but it's pretty straightforward once you get that in place. So now we have the new, there we go. So this is kind of what we expect. So enabled, Joe.Strickland. All right, perfect. It looks good. So we're sending this as the webhook body, and based on that, the next thing I'll do is I'll just do another little quick condition where I check the response. We know that the response is going to look a specific way because when we built this flow, we set that response up, right? So we can now go in and check response. First value we'll do here, and we expect the response to look something like this, right? Because that's what we defined in our previous flow. So let's go ahead and delete that. So now, hold on, let me go ahead and fix this here. There we go. Now we can say first value status contains success, go to the left path. Otherwise, it's going to go to the right path. So this is the basic flow, right? All I'm doing is I created a flow that concats some values. It sends a response, a success or a failure response. After that, I'm going to check that success or failure, and then I'm going to do something based on it. For demo purposes, we don't need to actually do anything, but I can save this. And now when I run this, it's going to do exactly what it says, and we'll check the logs in a moment. And if I did everything correctly, basically we should end up on this left side here And that should tell us that, hey, we called this flow and we got back a successful response. So if I come and look at the logging, you can see here that it called play. This is what it sent in the request. The body was status enabled, username Joe Strickland. The response that it got back was error message empty, status success, response Joe Strickland enabled. We then checked that and it said contains success success, so we went to the left path. So now we can easily see that we were able to call another kind of modularized flow. And if we go into the logs, you can even see that the modularized flow was run, and it says it was run by API. So it was called from this flow, right? Which is awesome. We can see that, hey, this was run. We did a check body. The body contained information. So that means we go left and we perform this concat. The concat was successful. So we send that back, right? And the response sent back was what we expected. So that was a quick overview on how you can use modularized flows with authentication between the flows, right? In this case, just basic authentication to call this subflow, but it's a great way to break up your flows so you can do easy troubleshooting, as well as make them more manageable or make reusable components. Hope you enjoyed this. Have any questions, please let me know.